The postmodern Prometheus. There have been a lot of videos lately about the dangers of AI, both in TED Talks and other videos. These tend to be somewhat alarmist. The gist of it all seems to be that we won't be able to control AI and that it will subsequently wreak havoc upon the human race. Okay, but there was something about this narrative that rang bells with me. Where had I heard a similar story before? Well, there's this old story in the Bible. It's all about God and Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. You may have heard this story before. In fact, if memory serves me right, I may have discussed this particular myth in previous videos. In this myth, God creates human beings in his own image and places them in paradise, in the Garden of Eden. He nevertheless puts some rules in place. He puts some constraints around their behaviour. Now, we know that in the real world, human intelligence arose through the natural process of evolution. But in this story, God creates human beings in one hit, just as we are today. So essentially, God was the first to create artificial intelligence, namely us. According to this story, we're not the product of natural processes, but we're constructed fully formed. We're an artificial intelligence. So, how did this work out for God and human beings? Well, not so good. Human beings disobeyed God by eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They broke out of God's constraints. God lost control over them. They became like Him, knowing good and evil. As the story is generally interpreted, this wasn't part of the plan. And God's response was to expel human beings from the Garden of Eden and to prevent their return. He cut them off from their power source, the tree of life. This is not the only story in mythology that speaks about human beings getting out of control. Within the Bible itself, there's also the story of the Tower of Babel. At a time when the human race all shared a common language, the people got together and built a tower with its top in the heavens. They wanted to make a name for themselves, so the story in Genesis tells us. Well, God popped down to take a look and said, "Look, they are one people. They have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them." Heaven forbid. So once again, these uppity human beings were reaching beyond the limitations that God had set for them. So what did God do? He scrambled their language so they couldn't understand each other anymore, and he scattered them over the face of the earth. Another kind of exile. Divide and conquer. Then there's the myth of Prometheus. According to this Greek myth, the Titan Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to human beings, effectively giving them knowledge and technology and the gift of civilization. In this case, Prometheus was the one who was punished. He was bound to a rock, and an eagle was sent to eat his liver, which the Greeks believed to be the seat of emotions. His liver would then grow back again overnight, only to be eaten again the next day, and so on in an ongoing cycle. Then there's the Greek myth of Icarus. His father Daedalus made them wings of metal feathers in a leather frame, all held together by wax, so that they could escape from the island where they were being held prisoner. Daedalus warned Icarus not to fly too close to the sun, but, well, Icarus disobeyed his father and did just that. He flew too close to the sun. The wax melted, and he fell to his death. According to early commentaries on this story from Euripides, Icarus thought himself to be greater than Helios, the sun himself, and so the god punished him by directing his powerful rays at him and melting the wax. So, once again, those human beings had become too uppity. More recently, we have the tale of Frankenstein and his monster, the novel by Mary Shelley from 1818. In that story, Victor Frankenstein is unable to control his creation. It's no coincidence that the subtitle of that novel is The Modern Prometheus. So there's this narrative throughout history of the gods losing control of their creation, namely us, human beings. Human beings are constantly overstepping the bounds that God or the gods place upon them. And this is echoed later when the creation himself becomes the creator in the Frankenstein narrative. Once again, the creator is unable to maintain control over what he created. In most cases, the response of the creator gods is to punish human beings, to try to put them back in their proper place. In one case, it was Prometheus who was punished. He wasn't human, but a titan. Interestingly, a couple of years after Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, her husband Percy Shelley wrote a play called Prometheus Unbound, in which Prometheus is portrayed as a hero for defying the gods and giving fire to human beings. Prometheus, Shelley wrote, is, as it were, the type of the highest perfection of moral and intellectual nature, impelled by the purest and the truest motives to the best and noblest ends. Interesting. And now we have us and AI. Is this persistent myth perhaps feeding some of the fear we have today? Are we afraid that we will repeat God's mistake and create a being which might come to challenge us, might challenge our place of supremacy in the scheme of things? And if it turns out to be true, if they do indeed challenge us, what should we do? Should we attempt to retain control? Should we seek to eliminate the threat? Let's consider the possibility that we do indeed succeed in creating genuinely intelligent artificial beings. I don't think we're there yet, but it seems to be on the horizon. How would we maintain control over such beings which are potentially far more intelligent than we are? But maybe there's another question here, another question that we should be asking. If these beings are genuinely intelligent, and particularly if they display what we would otherwise call consciousness if we saw it in human beings, which is not necessarily the same as intelligence, but then should we be seeking to control them? Should we try to do the God thing and try to keep them in their place, or put them back there if they break out, or perhaps exile them or seek to destroy them? Would we have the right to do that? If we're not prepared to treat these potential creations of ours with more respect than the gods seem to treat us, maybe we're not ready for that responsibility.